It's that Booker time of the year again, folks, on the literary shores of this idiotic little island that still sees itself as a player on the world stage. Whereas even in literary terms, this is clearly no longer the case. But anyway, here's what the shortlist looks like, divided as it were along two clear lines: novels that lead into the personal and the intimate, where the heart of the story is character-driven introspection or quiet domestic dramas, and those that ambitiously tackle the broader existential issues of our time: ecological crisis, colonial legacy, and technological alienation. I am currently reading Rachel Kushner's Creation Lake, which includes a series of missives written by the radical environmental philosopher Bruno Lacombe to the members of the Moulinards, a radical farming collective in southwestern France, who regard him as their mentor and ideological guide. These letters delve into themes such as humanity's estrangement from nature, the philosophical underpinnings of anti-civilization movements, and the significance of prehistoric art and culture. Lacombe's reflections often serve as a counterpoint to the protagonist Sadie Smith's espionage activities, providing a kind of philosophical context to the narrative. And these are also often the best bits of the book, offering insights into the ideological motivations driving the Moulinard collective's actions. Here's Lacombe, for example, talking about our relationship with tobacco and thus with fire. Bruno told them that the first man to play with fire was also the first man to smoke. But where did Homo erectus get fire? As the story went, Prometheus and his famously dumb brother, Epimetheus, were assigned the important job of distributing a positive trait to each of the animals in the kingdom on Earth. Epimetheus plunged into this work, handing out traits: to bees, the ability to make honey; to deer, a talent for leaping and scampering; to owls, a head that could swivel 270 degrees, and so forth. But by the time Epimetheus got to people, he had run out of qualities in his quality sack. It was at this point, when the sack was empty and Epimetheus had nothing to bestow, that his brother Prometheus stepped in, stole fire from the gods, and gave that to man as his positive quality. But here's the catch, Bruno said. The catch is that fire is not always positive, and more crucially, fire is not a quality. It is not a trait that a life form can possess. It isn't night vision or silent wing feathers or a hinged jaw, a spring-loaded capacity to pounce. Man, bland and featureless in this myth, lacking in his own special trait, was condemned instead to ingenuity, to being a devious little bastard. In his ontological featurelessness, different from the rest of the animals in the kingdom, man had to figure out how to work with fire to compensate for lack. Man would come to rely on fire as a crutch. His use of fire would stand in for what man was denied: the possession of a positive trait, as all the other living creatures were given. This myth of the brothers, one dumb and the other crafty, Bruno told them, and the substitution of technology for traits was, let's face it, not entirely mythical. In fact, it was accurate, he said, in explaining the miseries and devastations of the world, in accounting for the use of fire to do bad instead of good, to hoard, to steal, to ravage, pillage, and oppress. The use of fire for harm instead of good seems to have taken hold, suspiciously and damningly, just as the Neanderthals began to disappear and Homo sapiens rose up, an interglacial bully who shaped the world we're stuck with. The culprit seems clear, Bruno said, but human history, the story of us, was still a great riddle. Examinations of the past, of dirt and DNA, could show us new ideas of where the entire project on Earth might have headed. Currently, he said, we are headed toward extinction in a shiny, driverless car, and the question is, how do we exit this car? In the Fu-Shi, or early heaven sequence of the 8 elemental trigrams, sky, thunder, fire, mountain, earth, wind, wood, water, lake, we see our current predicament perhaps being, played out or recognized thousands of years before we would finally reach this driverless car crossroad. And we start, of course, with standing up, Homo erectus, looking up to heaven, Chan, the pure yang force, the initiator of all movement. And this initial gaze from earth to the heavens is both an act of awe as well as a signal of our first separation from the earth, our aspiration to transcend the animal world and access something higher. This is the beginning of our journey, an upward stretch that mirrors the myth of Prometheus, who stole fire for humankind, granting us the potential to create and destroy. Moving from heaven and heaven's pure potential to thunder, we find the initial awakening of humanity's creative force through fire. Thunder represents the first active use of fire, as well as tool making, the early gestures that distinguish humans from other species. Here is where the Promethean moment occurs, the stealing of fire, a moment of boundary breaking discovery that ignites curiosity, energy, and aligns with the myth referenced by Kushner speaking through Lacombe, where fire is both a gift and a curse. Fire, which is to say fire as a signifier, the trigram, aligns with this explosive spread of human culture, civilization, and technology. Fire is the expansion phase of our nascent species and all the various primitive technologies that we began to fashion, literally spreading like wildfire. And this is because we human apes mastered not only fire itself, but also began using it to create tools, to build societies, and eventually construct complex systems. This stage represents growth, ambition, illumination, where we use our primate ingenuity to shape our environment. We harness fire for survival, but also for domination, marking the beginning of our technological reliance. After fire, mountain, a sobering pause, following on, shall we say, in the modern world after perhaps 200 years of industrialization, or maybe consider the year 1988 with the formation of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, in which I think we all begin to glimpse the cost of fossil fuels, realizing how this devilish pact with industrialization is now tearing apart our habitat irrevocably. Mountain signals a call for restraint, a moment to acknowledge our limits. But, true to form, we mostly ignore this, choosing instead to have our cake and eat it. Earth waits for us to choose a different path, resilient yet ravaged, while we mostly look away, unwilling to embrace the humility it demands. And I guess this is especially relevant today, as we have once more, in our own way, elected a key player in this idiotic earthly drama, Mr. Trump, back into office, and all that pertains. Trump's ecological track record, us hand-wringing liberals will tell you, includes withdrawing the United States from the Paris Agreement, rolling back environmental regulations, and promoting fossil fuels pretty strongly over renewable energy. His administration's policies have been widely criticized for undermining climate action and natural resource protection. With his return to power, it's likely that these trends will persist, jeopardizing climate goals and deepening the environmental crisis and, hastening all of us towards an apocalyptic game over. But enough, perhaps, with the hand-wringing, for I would say that every single one of us, me included, Donald Trump, his greed, his boundless avarice, his inability to see past the tip of his own fake tan nose or the desires of his stomach or genitalia. This man is not really an aberration, but rather the imperfect encapsulation of us idiot homo-sapiens teetering on the brink. And the truth is that we're all chasing our own little hollow glories, guzzling resources and opportunities without a thought for anything or anyone, other than where the next refill for the battery on our devices is coming from. Look around. We're all fumbling along with the same short-sighted impulses, dressing it all up as progress and technology. and democracy and all of that, while, laying waste to everything that sustains us. Even a good old Rachel Kay, the modern American novelist, jetting around the globe for tours and conferences and festivals, each flight, each hotel stay and catered event leaving its environmental mark. Her book, Creation Lake, like so many others, critiques the very system that enables its existence: fossil fuel-fed energy, cars, machines, pulped forests, industrial printing, and the vast logistics of warehousing and shipping. All of it churning away at Earth's resources, expending more than any reader could imagine or want. And yet, will Creation Lake last 30 years, let alone 300? Unlikely. But hey-ho, even though we're all kind of clearly incapable of actually doing anything about any of this, I am curious as what the Yi would suggest as an answer to putting, the brakes on the driverless car. The car, of course, being us, our own blind, self-serving desires and instincts, all on autopilot. So I threw the coins and I got Hexagram 63. After completion, water over fire, which sounds about right. In the simplest of terms, the fire of industry and consumption needs to be put out. But clearly not by our own self-serving hands. The fire of our greed, our short-sightedness, our illusions of mastery, all these so-called human achievements are clearly here facing their final reckoning. The divine solution, we might say, isn't salvation, but a sort of form of rebalancing, a return to the equilibrium of Earth, as represented by this trigram. Traditionally, Hexagram 63 is also symbolized by a pot cooking over a fire, an image of pressure building under containment. And here, who or what, we might ask, is being cooked? Well, it's the proverbial frog. Us, of course, who back in 1988 received that first substantial warning that this vaunted industrial heaven that we were in was in fact burning us alive. But hey, we stayed comfortable, submerged in our pot, ignoring the gradual rise of heat until the point at which we can no longer adapt, which I'd say is about now. And so the bodies begin to float to the surface, grim evidence of our own failure to heed the signs. In the judgment of Hexagram 63, we read of things finally falling into order, but only through a kind of reversal, a kind of dissolution, a sort of cosmic irony, we might say, completion arriving only when our systems fail, our delusions drowned, and all of us returning to the primordial state from which we arose. Completion, in this light, isn't our doing, it's nature's closing chapter, a reminder that the end has always been written into the beginning, the deluge waiting just beneath the surface.